Hey, welcome to the Agency Uplift podcast, the podcast all about the unique experience of growing an agency, the ups, the downs, the challenges, the learnings, the opportunities, and the potentially crazy stories. Brett, we'll see what you got for us. I'm Sean, agency owner of over 7 years and co-founder of an agency called Social Commerce Club, and I am joined by Brett Friedman, founder and CEO of the creative strategy agency. Brett, welcome.
Thanks, Sean. That was an absolutely wonderful introduction.
Brett, why don't you tell us a little bit about the creative strategy agency?
Sure. Uh, as you can probably tell by the name, we do creative strategy. I should differentiate. We do creative strategy primarily for performance marketing and primarily for e-commerce brands who do performance marketing. So we do have a little bit more of a small niche there. And we do modular creative strategy services, meaning most agencies will try and just deliver the end product, which in our case is typically ads. We do that. We totally deliver ads. We also try to break out the entirety of creative strategy piece by piece. So we will do what's called customer research. So this is one of the most unique offerings that we have because many brands completely skip this part of the process. But we will actually come in and interview the customers of our clients and learn as much as we can, their buying triggers, why they love the brand. So oftentimes you will have folks that are spending thousands on your shampoo company and you want to know why, because they really, really love your brand. And it turns out if you give them free shampoo, you can just ask them. So this is one of the services that we provide that is fairly unique. And this is part of the creative research process. So that also includes doing competitive analysis, looking into culture, what's going on in the real world, as well as like understanding your company deeply. So this is one little fragment of what creative strategy is. That's at the top part of the funnel. So once you do creative research, then you can get into insight generation or idea generation. So we actually also have a service for this. One of the things that I've heard more and more over the years doing these interviews for my clients is that people like don't know how to come up with new ideas, or rather they can, but they either don't have a steady process for it, or they are a founder. They've been working on the same brand, their brand for 6, 7, 8 years, and they just can no longer come up with fresh ideas, fresh perspectives. So we have a service that is fully just idea generation for folks, which is really, really fun, as you would imagine. And we have all kinds of systems and tech that we use to try and to be able to kind of give variety over a long period of time. So that's our second step in the creative strategy journey. So you have the research part, you have idea generation. After you have idea generation, then you have briefing. You turn those concepts into briefs. We also offer briefings modularly, a la carte, on its own as a service. Pretty standard, but you can do UGC briefs, you can do design briefs. We also do studio briefs. So that's another part of the segment. And then, of course, we can produce ads. So we do offer design on its own as a service. Typically, people also want the ads as that end product. So we can do all these things end to end, and then we also break it out. So I'll pause there. That's the creative strategy agency.
So I have so many questions. All that stuff sounds really, really cool. And we were talking a little bit earlier before we started recording about, origin stories. And so I'd really love to understand kind of like how you position this and how you arrived at these services. Did you start offering these? Because these sound fairly different and differentiated compared to a lot of agencies that I talk to.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. It's really kind of you. The origin story is essentially that my entire career I've worked in between agencies and technology. So typically an agency that is building some kind of technology for that agency's services. And so these things, technology has shown me how you can take any kind of process, even a creative process, and make it a step-by-step checklist of here's everything you can do. Now, there is still something magical that happens in the brain of a good creative strategist that allows them to take some process, take this large amount of information and isolate it and distill it into some insights, ideas, and then a full script. It is still kind of a magical process. But you can take that magical process and make it repeatable and systematize it. And over the years, I had been slowly systematizing this more and more to the point where I realized that we can really create an amount of volume and variety that I think very, very, very few people in the industry are able to do. And that's not like we're special. It's just a system. And because I've just done it so many times and I've seen so many folks doing it, I was able to kind of distill it into this repeatable thing. So that was really the core origin for me, is I realized I had this system I was using that very few people were using. And that I wanted to share it with people. So actually, it started because I was doing a lot of consulting and just helping folks figure out how to build this system internally to their brands. So I would jump on, train teams. It would take 3 months. I have 600 slides of deck slides that talk through every little step of that creative strategy equation that I was talking through earlier. And I was like, oh, maybe I can just have people that do this, like all the jobs I've ever had working at agencies, and I can kind of do this for myself. So I took all my consulting clients, and then I started hiring, and that's that's it. That's simple.
That's really, really cool. I mean, you're saying exactly what I would want to hear, which is it comes down to systems and processes and checklists. I mean, that makes sense. When I was kind of looking at your agency makeup earlier and seeing like you've been able to do a lot in a short amount of time, and you mentioned a little bit about relationships, which I'd love to hear more about that, but also the fact that you've built it into a repeatable process. I mean, gold star, gold star. That makes a lot of sense. Do you, before we dig into more of like the relational side of things, uh, do you have a sort of a specific way that you go about approaching creating systems, checklists, processes?
Question.
Because you've obviously been very successful at it.
I will say that anytime I find myself doing something, no matter what it is, I have this this bug finding machine in my brain that will find that the places where I think things can be better. And I think this actually started. So my one job before it was all agency tech world was actually a fintech company, a financial technology company that did sell side research based on insider trading trends. Very, very different. But there were so many little problems in the data sets, in the conversations we would have with clients, in the way that we operated, that I started to understand that anything that you're doing can be broken out and can be improved. And so it actually started as this kind of like this anxiety that I have where I just wanted to make everything I was doing a little bit better. And also maybe an ambition. When I was at that startup, I mean, it was a startup. So I was like, oh, this is amazing. Let me see if I can make this better. Maybe I'll be rewarded. Like maybe I can, move up my career. Maybe I can do this myself. All these kind of like, typical childish ambitions that I had pushed me to just start making lists. So ask my wife, she'll tell you I'm completely obsessed with lists. I make so many lists. I have lists and lists of ideas, lists and lists of like people, all kinds of lists. And so at the core of it is anytime that I'm doing something, I try to write out step by step what I'm doing. And then when you do that, it's so easy to see where you can get improvements because
Totally.
Yeah, you're almost always just kind of BSing, right? Almost every job in any kind of industry, you just make it up. And sure, there's usually someone that's going to tell you, hey, this is how you do things. And most companies at some scale, they do have real process. Even those processes, almost always, it's just some guy who tried to do the thing, and then he was like, okay, I'm going to write this down, right? That's all a system is. So once I realized that, I was like, okay, I'm going to write everything down. And then every time I worked on a new client, I would just refine it a little bit, refine it a little bit, refine it a little bit. Oh, add a step here, add a step there. Oh, I just talked to this really smart person, and they said they do this. Let me throw that in the process. Okay, that's kind of hard. Let me see how I can tweak that. And that's how it goes. I mean, you really can build a business just on that simple process of writing things down and then training other people on how to do it, of course. Like that's sometimes the hard part. So you do really need to articulate well what it is that you're doing when you're doing it, because especially with creative strategy, the top people, often they cannot describe what they're doing because it's magic. They'll just be like, I don't know, dude. I sit down, I look at the brand, I have 1,000 ideas. Like, what do I tell you? So I want to be the opposite of that.
It's not helpful. Like, yeah, I'm glad that you're great at it, but this isn't helpful to anybody else.
Yeah, exactly right. And the real value that you can get out of systems is combining top tier talent with a system, because they already have the magic superpower of creativity. If you give them a thing to amplify that, and I think that's the value of tech, they can do 10x or 100x the work. So people are all afraid, oh, AI is going to replace me. It's clearly better than me at this thing already. Totally fine, because you can be a cyborg. If you're really good, okay, cool. Instead of working on 5 clients at capacity, now you can work on 50 clients because you have this machine to amplify the scope of what you're capable of doing. So tech is really exciting to me because it takes those step-by-step processes that I'm obsessed with making, and it just fully automates them. So, that's a little bit. Hope that answered that question.
No, You're speaking my language. So I like to think of it in terms of like the 10-80-10 framework or principle, where it's like first 10% is human starts it. Next 80% is that goes to some kind of automation or AI or some kind of process where it just goes through the pipeline. And then the final 10% is, again, the human basically being like, it's good or it's not good, carry on. If you can identify spots in your agency and do that, you're freeing up like orders of magnitude of time so that that person doesn't need to be hand holding and babysitting that process from start to finish, but they're initiating it and then they're approving it. But it's basically turning people into managers of systems rather than people like having to execute every single task one at a time, at a time, at a time, at a time.
Yeah, I really love that model. 10 was it?
10-80-10. It works. It works really well. I first heard that from Dan Martell, and he was talking about how to set up VAs for success by basically you doing 10, they do 80, and then you do the final 10 to make sure that they're maximizing. But then you apply that to, you know, automated systems and AI, and then you get, 10x the output that a VA could do as well. So you're actually just getting so much more. And then the only bottleneck is basically your ability to provide attention to the first 10 and the last 10. And then so you basically build or scale a team based on initiating things and then approving them and making sure that it's the output that you were expecting and meets the quality standards, and if not, restart again. Yeah. I mean, that's a gross oversimplification, but at the same time, I do think that that's kind of where we're headed, where it's basically like, we're not going to be agencies of people managing smaller teams of people. I think we're going to be agencies managing people managing specialized processes and AIs.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think in particular where the competition will exist is in the process itself, because if we're able to essentially automate any of these 80% processes, and it's just 10% on either side, you have a competition of processes. And in some ways, this is what business is already, right? It's is my system better than this system to get the output that people want? Tech just amplifies that, right? So you can create this gauntlet. And I think when people talk about the agent marketplace, this is where my mind always goes. If you've heard about agent marketplaces, the idea is that, all of these agents that will get created, they can do different things, right? They can, scrape emails, they can do sales processes, they can do marketing processes. Maybe they do media buying, maybe they create ads. All of these little agents will be more or less efficient based on their process at each of these components of whatever you're trying to get done, right? Their outputs will vary. And so what I believe will happen is these agent marketplaces that will exist will get ranked very quickly on the ones that have the best output. Now, if we're thinking about a 10-80-10 world, there's still going to be some QC, there's still going to be some input, and the user will still be relevant. I do think that's true to an extent, but it may also just be a battle of process and who has the best process. And whoever has the best process, either they can greedily keep that to themselves, oh, I have this agent that's amazing and it does things incredibly, or they will sell it on some marketplace and then everyone will try and get that very best thing, and the output will be explicit, right? If we're talking about ads, for example, there's a performance of an ad that is an output of this agent, and everyone will flock to the one that creates the best performance. Now, obviously, there needs to be some dynamism in what the process outputs, because if it outputs the same thing for everyone, there'll be convergence, and there won't be any value anymore. But that's another tangent.
It's fascinating stuff, and it devolves into philosophical discussion very quickly.
Yeah, good place to stop, right? Not practical.
Yeah. Let's stop while we both know what we're talking about. So let's steer this back to your agency story. One question that I love to ask people in the agency world, especially, is so you've been in this journey for a year and a half, 2 years, somewhere around there.
Yeah, that's about right.
What are some standout like big struggles you've had that you've been able to sort of overcome? Because I mean, in the agency space, there's a lot. What's one that stands out that you should have worked through, and how did you get through it?
Sure. There's the easiest answer here is that I tried to be Tube Science, which is this agency that you may know that does performance-based advertising. Great agency. They do creative. They charge nothing but the performance basis, and they make lots and lots of ads. They have a beautiful studio. They get decent performance. I tried to do the same thing as a little guy. Now, I believe that they raised the money. They're already at scale. They have a large amount of spend on the platform. And so I was like, okay, I know I can get performance. Totally true. There's a pretty easy way to do it, which is you launch a lot of ads with a lot of variety. So we can totally capable of that. Now, the thing that I didn't think about doing a performance model is that you have to pay upfront for all of the content production, and I was just a little guy getting started. So I closed a bunch of deals real quick. Everyone's super excited. Oh, this guy's doing performance basis. Like, everyone knows this guy. Okay, he's in the industry. Like, sounds like it's gonna be a great deal. And it was for them. I mean, we made tons and tons of creative, and I just poured cash into making all this content. So even getting winners and getting paid, like the margin still was not a livable wage. So this was my first like big mistake that I made, and the easy answer to get through that is just you do a blended fee. So essentially you have some flat fee that covers the cost of production, and then you get the performance basis, so you share the upside, but you don't take all the risk yourself, especially as a small guy that's just getting started. That was my maybe generous spirit shooting me in the foot.
So what made you want to try that, and how long did you stick with that before you changed your model?
Yeah. Well, the reason I want to start that was because deeply I believe that performance is what matters for most people running ad accounts. In some ways you're just selling money, right? You're selling revenue. You're selling cash on cash return. So I wanted to just get to the bottom of that, say, listen, yeah, I understand what we're doing here. Let's make you some money. I'll take on all the risk. And I trust myself to be able to get performance. The problem is that there are so many factors involved, so much variability from the media buying, the type of creative. For example, content creator, UGC content costs a lot more to produce than remix ads. And when UGC content is the only thing working in the account, then you have to go and make those, but those are the most expensive things to make. So there's a lot of variability that I just naively did not account for, and I should have known about because I've done this 1,000 times across multiple agencies. But I think that's one of the things that you learn owning a business versus working in someone else's business, is that the P&L is on your head, and you need to know all of your costs all the time, down to the dollar. So I think that was one of the kind of hardest things there. Yeah, so that was why I wanted to start it. I really just wanted to get performance. Now, the thing is, you actually get better performance when people pay you more. And this is one of those counterintuitive facts that seems like biased as an agency owner. But again, I came from the background of like trying to be as, taking all the risk and being as generous as possible. What happens though is if you get paid a higher flat fee, you put that money towards better production. And when you can make better ads, you get better performance. It's actually not rocket science. So that was another lesson where I realized that like, my naive inclination to be small and to ask for less and to be more generous and take on the risk myself was actually foolish, in that there's a win-win state in which we're both making more money. And if you just move towards that, then everyone's actually a lot happier. So
I'm so glad you brought that up. This really mirrors a conversation I've been having with another agency owner. And also I see this pop up from time to time, because when you're just starting out, it can be scary to charge what the service is actually worth. It can be scary to charge what you need in order to do a good job. And I know that some people have actually been able to create an agency that is very, very low fee, and it's almost like it's so systematized and automated that it's almost like a SaaS product, and you're calling it an agency. And I think that sounds well and good, but you do have to realize that you need a massive sales machine to support that, because you need a lot more people, a lot more clients coming in. You're going to have more churn. If you're focused on 150 clients rather than 50 clients, you're going to have more churn, so you're going to need to sell more. But then also, the lower the fee, the less resources you have with which to actually do great work for those clients. So you need to make sure that your really cheap service is really, really, really good. Otherwise, why are people paying you? You're basically just a churn machine. That's one thing that I try to tell people is you need to find out what it actually costs you to deliver like amazing service. I mean, first you need to be able to deliver amazing service. If you don't know what you're doing and you're like, I'm going to charge $8,000 a month. Okay, don't. Like maybe just go and work at an agency for a couple of years and actually learn how to do things before you start one. But if like think about the amount of attention and resources and the quality of people that you can assign to a client that you're actually charging a fair amount of money, like $5,000 versus $500. A lot of agencies that start out, and probably a number of agencies that are listening to us now talk about this, they're listening to us and saying like, oh shoot, like I'm charging $500 a month, and to you I'm saying you're probably losing money, or you're limiting what you can actually do for that client. So it's so important to actually price realistically, but in a way that you can actually deliver results and impact and performance. Because if you can't, then why are we doing this? If you can't, this is a really really stressful business model. Otherwise, you could be a plumber. You could do something simpler than this.
Easier ways to make money.
There are easier ways.
It's true. I think a lot of agency owners subsidize their own labor. Rather than charging high prices, they know they can do this amount of work. And so they'll take on a very low price so they can get their early clients, but they're not really able to pay themselves at all. And I think that, you should know your worth, and it's totally fine to get your first, get some case studies in there, get your lessons in and everything. But do that while you have another job. Don't start an agency, charge $500 a month, and then pay yourself, $500 a month, because you end up having a miserable experience, and the client will also be less happy, right? You're not going to be happy doing the work, so they're not going to be happy with the output. It's okay to do that to get those early case studies, but I think there's a really, really good concept from a book called Managing the Professional Services Firm by this guy called David Meister. And there are 3 types of work, and they should correlate with the type of talent that you apply to that work, and then your prices should also correlate with that. The 3 types of work, and I'll totally botch the names of these, but it's something like procedural, which is essentially templated output. And this is the same across all professional services firms, any kind of agency. So it could be a law firm where you have your boilerplate contracts, an agency. If you're doing ads, these are your templated ads. And then that's the bottom core. If you have that kind of work, you can have junior talent do that work. If your processes are very, very good. That's why it's called procedural, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's very so coming back to that step by step, if you have that, then yeah, it can operate more like a SaaS. Maybe you will have more churn, but that's a scalable thing that you can have repeating with just junior talent. Now, the middle is gray hair. Gray hair work is the work where some of it is a little templated, but it needs customization. There's something special about your brand. You need to tweak it a little bit. It can't just be a template. It has to be something that makes sense for whatever that company is doing. That's the gray hair. I think most agencies live here in this gray hair spot where they're taking some frameworks that they know work across other clients, and then they're applying them to their current clients. Then you could have middle tier talent. You have people that are, still early in their careers, but not junior, right? They've done some things. And again, your price can be middle tier. And then you have brain work. Brain work is the top tier. This is where you need senior talent. And this is for those, top tier brands that need cutting edge concepts. So if we're talking about ads, for example, it needs to be net new every time. They need a studio. They want UGC. They want customer interviews. They want founder interviews. Every kind of content, you need to be making all of it. And it needs to be fully customized to what they're doing. You can't copy anyone else. It needs to be cutting edge such that if another brand were to look at that concept, they would say, wow, I want to be like that guy. That's something that I think in terms of pricing structure is really important. And then in terms of the talent that you give. So often if you're an owner and you're starting as just the owner, you have to figure out where you live. It's totally fine if you're a junior talent yourself and you want to start an agency. Go for it. That would be awesome, right? Just know that you should try to be more systematized and be more templated, because that's what's going to allow you to be repeatable and get really, really good at a system without having to get all of those years of experience to do that cutting edge brain work that really only the top tier of experts can do.
I love how you laid that out, and that book is on my book list, but I haven't read it. But now it's just been bumped right back to the top. I think I've got it sitting in my Audible wish list right now.
Love it. Yeah.
So what's the title of the book again?
Managing the Professional Services Firm
by David Meister. Yeah. That's awesome. I love how it's split up into the 3 different buckets. I've never heard it said that way, but makes so much sense. So aside from your sort of pricing structure and how you were, I guess what the offer was, how has the agency really changed since you started it?
Question. How has the agency changed? I mean, we've grown a little bit. I still keep the team pretty lean. I guess the processes that we use, similar to what I was talking about earlier, we continue to test and iterate on them. So we have a more complex audit structure now where we go into more details. We basically go into more depth. We use more tools. So when we first started, it was just a hack together tech stack. And especially with all the AI tools that are coming out, we're constantly testing new things and integrating them where they make sense and like cutting other tools that no longer make sense. So the tech stack has expanded considerably and also is more keyed in. So the process is more specific. And in general, I think that would be true across the agency. So of course we're still fairly new, so we don't have some grandiose kind of hero's journey plot where I can tell you, I had some huge wins and then huge losses and then huge wins. We're still fairly young, but I think generally where we focus the most is on that process, and the types of clients too would be the other big thing. So I think there's always a little bit of exploration in the type of client that you work with, and I think that you have the inclination to always move up market. As you grow, you want bigger brands that are a little easier to work with, that have more spend, that you're more confident you can win with. And we've tried actually to layer it more like I was just explaining with David Meister's book, so that we can still service everyone. But there is a little bit of cut at that bottom layer where things that no longer make sense, they start to get more expensive for us to do, or the margin is so slim that it's hard to justify with the other kinds of clients that you're working with. So I think for any agency owner, that's probably something that they go through is you there's good churn sometimes.
Oh, for sure.
You want to stop working with someone, and we always make sure that we'll recommend to someone else. We have other people that are able to take them on or that can do a good job. But
yeah, you never just fire a client without trying to hand them off to someone who's going to do good work for them. Like even if the relationship wasn't as good as it could be, you always want to leave people better off than when they found you. Like that's kind of like an unofficial core value of mine, is leave people better than they found you. Kind of like leave the world better than you found it in general. And that starts with people. So absolutely. I love that. So for you guys, since you sort of maybe raised the bar in terms of what level of brands can start with you, like where does your ICP start?
Good question. We still target e-commerce. We try to base it more on ad spend in the account instead of total revenue, because you can be making $100 million a year and spending $100 million a year and have no spend in your account. So we try to start the smallest we would do is $20K a month on Meta alone. And we have a special startup tier, and we really only do this if you have a cool, innovative product that we think is going to explode, and we're like excited about working on the product because we know that we can get a chunk of that upside as it happens. But yeah, that would be the kind of lower end, and then we try to be around $50K a month ad spend as our real minimum.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is there a favorite, either? I mean, you don't need to call it a name, like a client name, if you don't want to, but is there a favorite niche or sort of industry that you like?
Favorite niche?
Where do you have the most fun, Brett? Where does Brett have the most fun?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's kind of repeating the answer of the startup answer, but I actually really love working with startups. And again, especially like an innovative new product, anything that has been recently invented, is recently possible. A lot of tech companies, the only time I'll go out of e-commerce and go into tech is when there's something new that can only exist because of adjacent technologies. There's this concept from Steven Johnson's book, how ideas are made, where ideas come from, something along those lines. And he talks about the adjacent possible, which is as technology continues to advance, there's always something on the fringes, on the edge, that becomes possible every time a new thing is invented. So with any kind of technology, it's always a combination of what's called the adjacent possible. And anytime I see this, which is fairly frequently because most tech startups are on that adjacent possible curve, then I will totally break out of it, and because I will have the most fun. It's always so fun. And usually the teams are young, they're scrappy. I don't mean young as in like actually literally young, like low in age. I mean like it's a young, fresh team that's just been thrown together. It could be a crack A team of super experienced guys or gals or whoever's on the team. But it's usually a lot more energetic. They have this ambition, this excitement. They have this new thing that they want to show the world. And those kind of companies I really, really love to work with. Now, it could also be a product. So plenty of e-commerce brands are in the same boat. Especially, I see a lot of innovation happening in the apparel space right now. I see a lot of innovation happening in the cosmetics and beauty space. So there's definitely a lot that is on that adjacent possible curve in e-commerce as well. So those are the brands where it's like the most well fit, especially if they have some funding and they can put money into ads, because then we can really play around and get get to have a lot of fun with the angles and the content production.
That makes a lot of sense. And also, as somebody who's started an agency and owns an agency, that's like where you're at the most entrepreneurial as well, because you're kind of connecting with people in that same vein. I completely get that. Um, I feel like the answer to this next question could be a little long based on your LinkedIn post. But what are your favorite tools, apps, or uses of AI that you use at your agency?
Wow.
If maybe distill it down to if there's one sort of takeaway that our listeners can have that they can go and apply at their agency to bring some of Brett home with them, what would it be?
Yeah, there are two smaller players in the AI creative strategy space that I'm very fond of. One is called Dax. You can check them out. I think it's joindax.com. They're building a AI creative strategist, and they're trying to do end to end from analytics all the way through briefing and maybe one day more than briefing. That's a really cool one. You'll see already once you get on that it's unique in ways compared to some of the other players in that space. I won't spoil anything, but go check that one out. And then there's another one called Best Ever AI. I think it's bestever.ai. And they're doing a similar process, but more focused on static ad production, which is super fresh. There's a lot of folks that are trying to play in the space, but they're mostly on the organic content side. So if you want to try and play around with static production, Best Ever AI is another cool one. So these are some more niche tools rather than the 10 that everyone talks about.
Awesome. We will link those in the show notes so that people can try them out. Is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't?
I love that question so much. What should you have asked me? You should have asked me how I'm feeling right now.
How you doing, Brett?
Sean, I'm doing great. I feel really good. I think one thing that gets ignored really, really often, too often, is how creative strategists feel, agency owners in particular, how they feel. I think there's a lot of burnout. It's very easy to get burnt out. Anyone else who's an entrepreneur probably knows you're just riding on adrenaline 16 hours a day, every single day, usually even more. And I think that the hustle culture has promoted that in a way that is unhealthy. So I think one of the things that I want to talk about, which is a secret passion of mine, is happiness research. There's a whole field of research that studies happiness. And it's not just this idea, the concept of happiness that you chase after and you actually get unhappy while trying to chase this ideal of happiness. It's not like that at all. In fact, it dispels all of your misbeliefs about happiness that cause you to be less happy. So I won't go too into detail because I'll talk about this is an entire other podcast, but I would be happy to send some notes through. There's a really great book I love to recommend called the Oxford Handbook of Happiness. It's literally that simple. It goes through almost every type of research, and not just the scientific backing, the psychological backing, but also the philosophical backing, spiritual. So it goes through these different elements, as well as how to educate yourself in different interventions that you can take. And you will very quickly be able to place yourself in a certain category and say, oh, these are my views, and it can help you expand. So just one tiny example, one fragment that's really, really interesting. There's this idea of emotionally intelligent happiness. Emotionally intelligent happiness is a form of happiness that comes when you recognize that you can't always be happy. There are ups and downs in life. And if you understand this, then even when you're super up and things are going well, you stay zen, neutral. When you're super down and things are going terrible, you still are able to stay neutral. And neutral is not bad, right? You're stable. You are able to have an inner contentness and inner happiness because things are going to swing back the other way. That's one little fragment, but highly recommend reading that handbook. And for anyone who's interested, I have another 45 recommendations I can make that I would be super happy to make, because burnout prevention is the most important thing when it comes to running a business.
Brett, I think that's a great place for us to end. And also, I'm going to preemptively invite you back on because I think that we have a lot more stuff to talk about. Burnout's a huge one. The agency business, the agency model, but also just being an entrepreneur in general, it's hard as hell. It's hard as hell. And if you don't have like a community of other entrepreneurs and agency owners around you, you can feel like you're the only person struggling this hard, when in reality everyone's kind of having this similar experience. They're just kind of presenting it in a different way. Anyway, I could talk for hours about this, and I'll have you on again, and I'd love to get into it. But thank you so much for having me on, for coming onto my podcast. See, you
Absolutely.
got me all turned around. Brett, where can people find out about you?
You could go to thecreativestrategyagency.com. That's our agency website. I also post on LinkedIn almost every day, so feel free to follow me there. And I'm constantly trying to come up with new metrics to measure ad accounts in, and talking about happiness here and there as well. So check it out.
Awesome. Thanks, Brett.
Thanks for having me.